My name is Charlotte. I was 28 when my birthday dinner became the night everything I thought I knew about my family shattered into pieces. The setting was perfect on the surface. A French restaurant in Boston, crisp white tablecloths, dim lighting that tried to make everyone look more important than they really were. My father, Richard, my stepmother, Vanessa, my golden child sister, Stephanie, her husband, James, my younger half-brother, Ethan, and my 82-year-old grandfather, Thomas, all sat around the table. I thought it was going to be a chance to finally bridge the distance between us. But instead, it became the opening scene of my worst nightmare. The waiter had just placed down plates when my grandfather leaned forward, smiling warmly at me. His voice was steady, carrying across the clinking silverware and background chatter. "So, Charlotte, how are you enjoying the apartment I bought for you on Beacon Street?" The words hit me like a punch to the chest. My fork froze in midair. My breath stalled. For a second, I thought I misheard. Then I whispered, "Grandpa, I live in a basement apartment in Somerville." The sound of my father's fork hitting his plate echoed through the room like a gunshot. His face drained of color, then flushed red. Around the table, Stephanie dropped her eyes to her lap. Vanessa adjusted her bracelet too quickly, as if hiding something. Ethan, the only one who looked as confused as me, mouthed, "What's happening?" The restaurant suddenly felt too bright, too silent, as if the world had tilted and left me exposed under a spotlight. My grandfather's brow furrowed. "That can't be. I gave your father $750,000 6 months ago. It was for you for your apartment, so you could have a real home while you built your career." I felt heat rush to my cheeks. My body was trembling not from cold, but from betrayal. I looked at my father. His jaw tightened. He reached for his glass of wine, took a long, deliberate sip, and refused to meet my eyes. "Dad," I said, my voice low but sharp, "what is Grandpa talking about?" The air around us shifted. The laughter from nearby tables sounded wrong, distant. The waiter approached oblivious, asking if everything was fine. My father muttered a stiff yes, his voice clipped. My grandfather didn't blink. His gaze stayed fixed on my father, hard as steel. It was the longest few minutes of my life. My birthday celebration had turned into a public interrogation, and the first crack in our family's polished facade had just opened. At that moment, something inside me whispered that nothing would ever be the same again. So, that was only the beginning. I could feel my pulse hammering as silence wrapped itself around the table. My birthday was ruined, but something deeper was crumbling too. My father's carefully crafted image of control, success, and perfection was cracking in front of everyone. Before I continue, I need to pause for just a moment. If you've ever sat in a room and realized the people you trusted most had been lying to you, you'll understand this story on a different level. Tell me in the comments if you've lived through a betrayal like that. And if you believe these stories matter, subscribe. Stay with me as I unravel what really happened that night. My father, Richard, had always been a man obsessed with appearances. To him, life was a series of carefully calculated investments, each choice weighed not by love, but by return. He raised my sister Stephanie to embody that philosophy. She was the lawyer, the partner at a firm by 31, married to a surgeon, the shining star at every family gathering. And then there was me, Charlotte, the struggling artist. He called my work a hobby. He mocked my clients, the late nights I spent hunched over my laptop in my basement apartment with mold on the walls and no heat in winter. I had spent years fighting to prove that my path, though messy, was mine. I refused his offers to save me with a marketing job at his firm. I didn't want to be saved if it meant surrendering my identity. But that night, when Grandpa casually mentioned the Beacon Street apartment, I realized this wasn't just about disapproval. It was about theft. My father had stolen something that wasn't his to control. The weight of $750,000 hung over the table like a ghost no one wanted to acknowledge. My stepmother, Vanessa, gave a hollow laugh, trying to shift the tension. "Richard handles so many transactions, Thomas. Surely there's been a miscommunication." Her voice was sugary, sweet, but her eyes were sharp, darting nervously. Grandpa didn't budge. His voice dropped calm, but cutting. "Richard, I trusted you with that money. I wanted my granddaughter to have stability while she chased her dream. Where is her apartment? For a moment, my father didn't answer. He just stared at his wine, swirling it in the glass as if he could disappear inside it. Finally, he looked at me. His voice was low measured. Charlotte, this isn't the place to discuss private financial matters. We'll talk later. But I had reached my breaking point. My father had always chosen the time, the place, the narrative. Not tonight. No, I said firmly, my voice steadier than I felt. We'll talk about it now, in front of everyone. Where is the apartment, Dad? The restaurant seemed to shrink around us. Every clink of cutlery from neighboring tables sounded distant, irrelevant. My grandfather's gaze stayed locked on my father. Stephanie stared at her plate as if it could swallow her whole. Ethan shifted uncomfortably beside me, his 16-year-old shoulders tense with confusion. I realized in that moment that this wasn't just about an apartment. It was about my life being manipulated, judged, and rewritten without my consent. My father had always told me what I couldn't do. Now he had taken what I was supposed to have without even telling me, and something inside me snapped. I wasn't just the overlooked daughter anymore. I wasn't the struggling artist desperate for approval. I was a woman whose family had betrayed her, and I was no longer afraid to expose it. That night, as my father avoided the truth and my grandfather demanded it, I understood one thing clearly: a storm was coming, and I was done being quiet. This was the turning point. I grew up believing survival meant endurance, enduring the comments, enduring the comparisons, enduring the constant reminders that I would never measure up. By the time I turned 28, life had become a tightrope walk between bills and exhaustion. My basement apartment in Somerville was dark and damp, the kind of place where the air always smelled faintly of mold, no matter how many candles I burned. The heating broke down whenever Boston winters hit hardest, and every morning I woke up to icy floors that chilled me to the bone. I stretched my freelance income so thin that every grocery run felt like a negotiation. Should I buy fresh fruit this week, or replace the ancient laptop I depended on for client work? Still, I kept going. I had earned my degree from a respected art school, and while steady clients were elusive, I wasn't ready to give up. Each small project, a logo for a startup, a poster for a local cafe, was a brick in the fragile foundation of the life I wanted. A life where creativity mattered more than a paycheck. But my father never saw it that way. To him, I was wasting time. Art is a hobby, Charlotte, not a career, he repeated on every phone call that grew shorter and sharper with the years. He dangled his firm in front of me like a lifeline: marketing positions, financial stability, a real career. He couldn't understand why I refused, but I knew the truth: taking his help meant surrendering control. He never gave without attaching chains. My mother had left when I was 15, building a new life in California with a new husband. Our relationship had thinned into occasional birthday calls, polite check-ins. She was too far away to stand between me and my father's disapproval. My sister Stephanie, on the other hand, was always there, always perfect. By 31, she was already a junior partner at a prestigious law firm, married to a surgeon living in a Beacon Hill brownstone that gleamed like a trophy. Every family gathering became a performance where my failures stood in stark contrast to her victories. Stephanie just closed another case my father would boast his pride sharp enough to cut me. And the unspoken question always hung in the air: why couldn't I be more like her? The truth, because I didn't want to be her, I wanted to be me. The only person who ever seemed to understand was my grandfather Thomas. A retired architect with an eye for beauty and detail, he was the first one to sit beside me when I drew as a child, the first to call my stick figures portraits. He never missed an art show, not the hallway exhibitions at school, not my senior thesis in college. He would squeeze my shoulder and whisper, "You have a gift. Don't let anyone bury it." When I graduated, when everyone else pushed me toward corporate safety, he sent me a simple card. It said, "I believe in you, always will." Those words became my anchor when doubt gnawed at me. Even as an adult, he respected my stubborn need to make it on my own. Pride and independence, two things I clung to like armor. I would rather eat instant noodles in a freezing basement than accept help from my father, knowing it would be used as leverage later. But in the weeks before my birthday, I had started to feel a flicker of hope. A brewery hired me to design their new labels. A small portfolio was building momentum. For the first time, I thought maybe, just maybe, I could carve out stability on my own terms. So when my father invited me to that birthday dinner at one of Boston's most expensive French restaurants, I wanted to believe it was a truce. Maybe he was finally ready to accept me. Maybe he saw my effort. Maybe he could stop looking at me as the family's failure. I spent hours getting ready. A simple black dress, carefully applied makeup to hide the exhaustion of late nights at my laptop. I told myself this dinner could mark a new beginning. But I was wrong. So very wrong. If you were in my shoes, barely surviving constantly compared to a perfect sibling, what would you have done? Tell me below. I want to hear your truth. Because that night didn't bring a fresh start. It brought an explosion of secrets so powerful it would tear my family apart. This was only the calm before the storm. My grandfather Thomas was the only reason I hadn't given up years earlier. When I was little, he would sit beside me for hours at the dining room table, our sketchbooks spread out between us. He'd show me how to draw the lines of a cathedral, how to shade the curve of a bridge. He was patient, guiding me through each mistake without judgment. I can still remember the smell of his cologne, the scratch of his pencil on paper, the warmth in his eyes when he said, "You see the world differently, Charlotte. That's your gift." He was a retired architect, someone who had spent a lifetime building beauty out of lines and vision. To him, art wasn't a distraction or a hobby. It was the foundation of culture, the heartbeat of memory. He told me stories about the greats Da Vinci, Frank Lloyd Wright, Zaha Hadid, as if I belonged in their company. At every stage of my life he showed up. Elementary school art fairs, my high school portfolio review, the college thesis show where I nearly fainted from nerves. There he was in the front row clapping until his hands were red. "You have a future," he whispered that day. "Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." When the rest of my family rolled their eyes at my decision to freelance, he quietly sent me a card. Inside was just one line written in his shaky script, "I believe in you, always will." I kept that card pinned above my desk in the basement apartment. On nights when the rent felt impossible, when I thought maybe my father was right and I was chasing smoke, I read those words over and over. Grandpa never pressured me to accept money or help. He knew my father used money as a leash. He respected my need for independence, even if it meant I lived in a basement with mold growing in the corners. He understood pride wasn't stubbornness, it was survival. That's why when he leaned forward at the birthday dinner and asked about the Beacon Street apartment, my heart cracked. Because if there was one person in this family I trusted completely, it was him. His confusion was genuine. His hurt was real. He hadn't given the money to me directly because he believed my father would follow through. That trust had been shattered, and with it mine. As the silence dragged on that night, I caught his eyes. They weren't angry at me. They were filled with disappointment directed at my father. A disappointment sharper than any raised voice. I realized then that Grandpa wasn't just my champion. He was the bridge between me and the family that constantly dismissed me. And that bridge had just caught fire. My father's betrayal didn't just rob me of an apartment. It threatened to destroy the one relationship that had anchored me my entire life. And in that moment, as the restaurant's glow blurred into something harsh and cold, I knew this wasn't only a story about money. It was about loyalty, respect, and the one person who had always believed in me discovering he'd been deceived too. I squeezed my water glass until my hand ached, trying to hold myself together. But deep inside, something was beginning to shift. Because when you realize even your strongest ally has been used as part of the lie, it's not just betrayal, it's war. Have you ever had someone you trusted completely, someone you thought was untouchable, get dragged into a lie that hurt you? Share your story in the comments. Your voice matters here. That night I thought Grandpa's support would be enough to shield me, but what he revealed next would ignite a confrontation none of us could escape. The appetizers had barely been cleared when Grandpa leaned forward again. His voice was calm, almost conversational, but the words carried enough weight to snap the fragile peace in half. "Charlotte, how are you enjoying the apartment on Beacon Street I drove by last week? The cherry trees are blooming. It must be beautiful this time of year." The fork in my hand clattered against the plate. My breath caught. My eyes darted around the table. Stephanie suddenly found her napkin fascinating. Vanessa twisted the gold bracelet on her wrist, her smile too stiff. My father's face drained of color, then flushed deep red. Grandpa, I whispered, my voice trembling. I don't live on Beacon Street. I live in a basement apartment in Somerville. The silence was sharp enough to slice through bone. My grandfather's eyes widened. He leaned back slowly as though trying to process words that made no sense. That's impossible. I gave your father $750,000 6 months ago to purchase an apartment for you. Everything was arranged through him while I was recovering from my surgery. The paperwork is clear. That money was for you. The restaurant seemed to tilt sideways. For a moment I thought I might be sick. My entire body felt hot, then cold, then hot again. $750,000. Enough to change my life. Enough to pull me out of the basement, out of the mold, out of the endless cycle of scraping by. And my father had it. I turned toward him, my voice rising. Dad, what apartment? What is Grandpa talking about? He cleared his throat, but his voice was unsteady. Thomas, this isn't the place for financial discussions. We'll talk later. No, I snapped louder this time. We'll talk now. You let me struggle every single day while you sat on money that wasn't yours. Do you have any idea what I've been living with? Do you even care? The waiter appeared at that moment, asking if everything was satisfactory. The timing was almost comical, if anything about this could be funny. My father forced a smile, muttered a curt yes, and waved him away. My grandfather didn't smile. He leaned forward, his voice low but sharp. Richard, what have you done with the money I entrusted to you? Vanessa jumped in, her laugh brittle. This is all a misunderstanding. Richard makes dozens of transactions every month. Funds can be temporarily allocated. Grandpa cut her off. This was no temporary allocation. It was a gift for my granddaughter. And I will not accept excuses. The tension at the table was suffocating. My chest felt tight, my hands numb. Ethan looked at me with wide, terrified eyes, his teenage face pale. He whispered, "Is this true?" but no one answered him. For years my father had criticized me for chasing art, for not choosing the smart path. But now, sitting at that table, I realized his criticism was more than words. He had actively stolen my chance at stability. He had made a decision that wasn't his to make. It wasn't about an apartment anymore. It was about control, about power, about whether I had the right to live my own life without his hand steering it. And that night, on what should have been a simple birthday dinner, his secret unraveled in front of everyone. If you were me sitting there realizing the people you trusted most had conspired against you, what would you do? Comment below. And if you want to see how this explosion tears everything open, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Because this wasn't just a revelation, it was a spark, and the fire was only beginning. We left the restaurant in silence. The ride to my father's house felt like a funeral procession, each car pulling into the driveway of the colonial-style home that had always stood as a symbol of his success. Its pristine white siding and manicured lawn mocked me. Inside, Vanessa ushered everyone into the formal living room, a space so rarely used it felt staged like the set of a play, where the actors hadn't rehearsed their lines. I perched on the edge of an antique chair, my hands clenched together, knuckles white. My grandfather refused to sit. He stood tall despite the limp that surgery had left him, with his posture rigid with contained fury. His voice carried like thunder in a room that had always demanded polite conversation. Richard, he said, not as a father to a son, but as a man demanding accountability. Where is the apartment I purchased for Charlotte? My father loosened his tie, a nervous gesture I remembered from childhood, whenever he was caught in a lie. He poured himself a drink at the bar cart before turning. Dad, you need to understand these decisions are complex. I was acting in her best interest. That doesn't answer my question. My grandfather's tone was ice. I transferred $750,000 into your account for one purpose only. I have bank records. I have the signed letter of intent. Where is the apartment? Vanessa jumped in before he could answer. Perhaps the money was placed temporarily in another vehicle while waiting for the right property. Richard manages countless investments. It's possible. My grandfather reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. He dropped it on the coffee table. Papers spilled out, bank statements, letters, undeniable proof. No, there was no miscommunication. I leaned forward, my heart hammering as I scanned the papers. My father's signature was there, acknowledging the funds and their purpose. My voice cracked when I asked Dad, "Is this true? Did Grandpa give you money for me 6 months ago?" For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he swallowed the last of his scotch and finally admitted, "Yes." The money was transferred to me. The room spun, my throat burned. Then where is my apartment? Why am I still living in a basement with mold on the walls while you sat on money that could have changed everything? "You weren't ready," he said flatly. "You're still chasing this graphic design hobby. I couldn't in good conscience hand you a luxury apartment when you haven't proven you can sustain yourself." It felt like a slap across my face. I stood up shaking with fury. "So you kept it. You just decided I didn't deserve it." "I invested it," he snapped back, defensive now. "That's what I do. I'm a financial advisor. The money isn't gone, it's working, growing." My grandfather's face hardened. "That money was not yours to invest. It was a gift for Charlotte. You acknowledged that in writing. You betrayed my trust and hers." Stephanie, who had been silent, finally spoke. "Dad was just trying to protect the investment until Charlotte was more established. It's not what it looks like." I rounded on her. "Stay out of this, Stephanie. Did you know?" She looked away. That was enough. "I knew Grandpa gave Dad money for you," she admitted quietly. "I thought you knew too. I thought you'd refused it like you always refuse help." My voice broke raw with disbelief. Why would I choose to live in a basement if I had an apartment waiting? Why wouldn't anyone tell me the truth? The betrayal settled over me like chains. Every eye in the room avoided mine except for Ethan's. His voice was soft, but cut through the tension. "Is that why you told me not to mention the apartment, Dad? You said it was a surprise for later. But it's been months." The silence that followed was heavier than stone. In that instant, I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a conspiracy. My father had stolen my future, and everyone else had stood by and let it happen. The walls of that polished living room had witnessed plenty of family gatherings. But that night, they bore witness to a reckoning. The moment Ethan's trembling voice echoed through the room, everything shifted. My 16-year-old brother had unknowingly exposed the rot in our family. His words cut deeper than anything else because they proved my father hadn't just stolen from me. He'd forced my own brother into complicity. I turned to Ethan, my chest tightening. "You knew," my voice cracked between anger and heartbreak. His eyes filled with guilt. "I didn't want to lie, Charlotte. Dad told me it was supposed to be a surprise. He said if I spoiled it, I'd ruin everything." The room went still. Stephanie's face flushed, her hands twisting in her lap. Vanessa's carefully painted smile faltered. My father downed another drink, his silence louder than any admission. I stood up, my body trembling. "So, let me understand this. Grandpa trusted you. You took the money. You didn't buy me an apartment. And then you made sure everyone, my sister, my wife of a stepmother, even my little brother, kept it from me. Every single one of you knew. And I was the fool in the basement." No one dared answer. My grandfather's voice cracked through the silence like thunder. "Richard, this is not a family matter anymore. This is fraud. I gave you a gift for Charlotte, and you conspired to hide it. How dare you drag Ethan into your lies?" Vanessa leapt up, her voice sharp. "This is getting out of hand. We did what was best. Charlotte doesn't understand finances. She rejects every chance at help. We were protecting her. Protecting me," I shouted, my voice shaking the chandelier above us. "Protecting me from what a life that was finally mine. You weren't protecting me. You were protecting the illusion of your perfect family. You were protecting Stephanie's image. You were protecting Dad's ego." Stephanie flinched but didn't deny it. Her silence said everything. Ethan whispered, "I'm sorry," but the weight of it crushed me. My little brother, the one person I thought was free of the manipulation, had been trapped in my father's web too. It hit me like a wave. I wasn't just betrayed by my father. I was betrayed by everyone sitting in that room. My stepmother's excuses, my sister's silence, even my brother's forced secrecy. The people I had trusted most had built a circle of silence around me, and they had all decided I wasn't worthy of the truth. I felt the walls closing in the air, thick with lies. My legs shook, but my voice grew stronger. You all looked me in the eye while I struggled. You knew there was a home waiting for me. You knew I was drowning in rent, fighting mold, eating instant noodles. And you said nothing. Do you have any idea what that feels like? No one spoke, not even my father. Tears blurred my vision, but anger burned hotter. I pressed my hands against the arms of the chair to steady myself. This isn't just about money, this is about trust, and every single one of you broke it. My grandfather's eyes glistened. His voice, though soft, carried the weight of finality. Richard, your selfishness has poisoned this family for too long. Tonight the truth is out, and the damage you've done may never be repaired. I looked around the room one last time, at Stephanie, who avoided my gaze, at Vanessa, whose lips were pressed into a line of smug defiance, at Ethan, who couldn't stop whispering apologies, and at my father, who stared into his glass as if it might swallow him whole. The betrayal was complete, the circle had closed, and I knew in that moment that something inside me had broken beyond repair. If you had discovered that every single person in your family had hidden the truth from you, what would you do? Would you walk away or fight until the end? Share your answer. I want to hear your voice. Because for me, this was no longer just a disagreement. It was war, and I was done being silent. The living room was silent, except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. Each tick felt like a hammer pounding against my chest. I thought the worst was already exposed, but the night had another cruel twist waiting for me. As my father poured himself another drink, I suddenly remembered something that had nagged at me for years. My scholarship, my internship, the opportunities I had clung to as proof that I could succeed on my own terms. My voice came out low, almost a whisper, but it cut through the silence. Dad, Grandpa, was my scholarship real? Or was that arranged too? The reaction was immediate. My father's eyes flickered with guilt. My grandfather's shoulders sagged. He looked away before finally answering. It was me. I established the scholarship through the Alumni Foundation. It was private, Charlotte. I wanted to give you a chance without you feeling like it was charity. My stomach lurched. The one thing I thought I had earned with pure hard work funding for art school wasn't even mine. My hands shook as I pressed on, desperate and terrified. And my internship at the design agency, the one I thought I got with my portfolio, this time Grandpa's voice broke. I knew the creative director. I asked him to consider your work, but Charlotte, you earned that spot with your talent. I only opened the door. His words were meant to comfort, but they sliced through me. Achievements I had carried like armor now felt hollow. Each victory I'd clung to as proof of my worth was now tainted by manipulation. I staggered back a step, the weight of it crushing me, so I never did anything on my own. Not once. It was all just strings being pulled behind the curtain. My grandfather reached out his hand, trembling. No, that's not true. Your gift is real. Your work is real. I only wanted to help. Help, my voice cracked with anguish. Do you have any idea what you've done? You made me doubt everything. Every long night I thought I was earning something, every time I believed I was finally standing on my own. You've stolen that from me, both of you. Tears burned my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. I wanted them to see my rage, not my weakness. Stephanie finally spoke, her voice cautious. Charlotte, we just wanted what was best. I cut her off, my words sharp as glass. No, you wanted control. You wanted to keep me in a box where I was always the struggling one, the stubborn one, the one who needed saving. You all knew, and you let me fight tooth and nail for scraps while you hid the truth. My father slammed his glass down on the bar cart, his composure cracking. You should be grateful, Charlotte. Without us, you wouldn't have made it this far. The words struck harder than any slap. Grateful for lies, for manipulation, for living in a basement when there was an apartment meant for me. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. My voice came out low but fierce. I don't owe you gratitude. I owe myself freedom. And tonight I see all of you for what you are. You're not my safety net. You're my prison. The silence after those words was heavier than any argument. My grandfather's eyes filled with tears. My father's jaw clenched. Vanessa folded her arms, smug. Stephanie looked away, shame finally creeping into her perfect facade. Ethan stared at me, his face pale with hurt and fear. For the first time in my life, I wasn't begging for approval. I wasn't waiting for validation. I was standing in the wreckage of every illusion I'd ever believed and realizing I had to walk away to survive. If you discovered that even your proudest accomplishments weren't what you thought they were, would you still trust your own talent? Or would you crumble under the weight of doubt? Tell me. I want to know. Because in that moment, I learned that betrayal doesn't just steal your future, it steals your past. And I wasn't going to let it steal my future, too. I couldn't breathe in that room anymore. The walls of my father's house felt like they were pressing in on me, suffocating me with years of lies, judgment, and manipulation. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought I might faint. Every face around me, my father with his clenched jaw, Vanessa with her icy smile, Stephanie with her lowered eyes, even my grandfather with his regret blurred together until I saw only one thing: betrayal. I grabbed my purse and stood my legs trembling but my voice steady. I'm done, I said, each word sharp enough to cut through the air. I'm done trying to make you proud. I'm done begging for approval. I'm done letting you control me. I'm done with all of you. The words hung in the silence like smoke after an explosion. My father tried to rise, but I shook my head. Don't follow me. Don't say another word. And then I turned and walked out. My heels echoed against the hardwood floor, the sound of finality. I opened the front door, and the cool night air hit me like a wave of clarity. For the first time that night, I felt like I could breathe. Tears finally streamed down my face. But beneath the pain was something unexpected. Liberation. I had barely made it halfway down the driveway when I heard footsteps. My first thought was that my father had come to drag me back. But when I turned, I saw Ethan. His blazer was too small for his growing frame. His tie crooked, his face pale with worry. He jogged to catch up breathless. Charlotte, wait. I froze my chest tight. Ethan, go back inside. He shook his head, thrusting a small gift bag toward me. You forgot this. I want you to have it. Inside was a bracelet braided from embroidery thread in shades of blue and green. His voice was soft, almost embarrassed. I made it in art club. The colors reminded me of the painting you did for my room. It's not much, but I slipped it onto my wrist, fresh tears burning my eyes. It's perfect, Ethan. Thank you. He looked down at his shoes, scuffing the driveway with one. Then his voice cracked. Are you really done with all of us, even me? My throat ached, but I forced myself to speak. No, not with you. Never with you. The relief on his face nearly broke me. What about Grandpa? He didn't know Dad kept the money from you. He looked as shocked as you did. I hesitated. My mind was still reeling, but I couldn't ignore what I'd seen in my grandfather's eyes. Real pain, real betrayal of his own trust. No, not with him either. Before I could say more, the front door opened again. My father's voice carried across the lawn, sharp and furious. Behind him, my grandfather's voice rose to meet it, filled with anger I had never heard before. You had no right to bring this up at her birthday dinner, my father roared. You had no right to keep it from her for 6 months, my grandfather shot back. Their voices collided like thunder as they approached. My father's face was red with rage, but my grandfather's was lined with determination. Charlotte, Grandpa called, ignoring his son. Please don't leave like this. We need to fix this. Fix it, I asked bitterly, my voice breaking. How do you fix years of lies? How do you fix stealing $750,000 meant for me? How do you fix making my little brother lie to my face? The fight behind me raged on, but in that moment none of it mattered. Because standing under the night sky, clutching the bracelet Ethan had made, I realized the truth. I couldn't fix them. I could only save myself. This was the moment I knew I had to draw a line. A boundary so clear there was no turning back. If you've ever had to cut ties with people you love for your own survival, tell me in the comments. And if you want to see how I rebuilt my life after walking away, stay with me, because the story is only getting darker before the dawn. The night I walked away, I thought the weight of betrayal would crush me. But the next morning, something unexpected happened. For the first time in years, I woke up without the desperate urge to prove myself to anyone. The silence in my tiny basement apartment felt different, less like a prison, more like a blank canvas. At first I drifted in a haze. I went through the motions, submitting freelance projects, answering emails, eating when I remembered. Yet beneath the numbness, a small flame began to grow. It was the realization that if my family had stolen so much of my past, I wasn't going to let them steal my future too. That's when Hannah appeared. She had just moved into the ground floor apartment above me, red curls bouncing as she introduced herself with a plate of cookies. "I hope this isn't weird," she said, "but I noticed you haven't been out much. Everything okay?" Normally, I would have brushed her off, but something about her openness cracked through my armor. Family drama, I admitted. Pretty major. Her eyes softened. Been there. My mom didn't speak to me for a year when I dropped out of med school to become a pastry chef. Want to talk about it over coffee? That afternoon, sitting in her bright kitchen with the smell of cookies in the air, I told her everything. From the stolen apartment money, to the scholarship, lies to the suffocating comparisons with Stephanie. Hannah didn't interrupt. She didn't offer excuses. When I finished, she simply shook her head. "That's messed up. No wonder you're drowning. But you're here. You're still fighting. That means something." Her words didn't erase the pain, but they gave me a lifeline. Over the next few weeks, Hannah pulled me out of the shadows. She introduced me to her circle of friends, local artists, who met weekly in a converted warehouse. They were muralists, sculptors, illustrators, each one chasing their passion without apology. For the first time, I felt understood. They didn't ask why I wasn't more like my sister. They didn't measure me against income charts or career ladders. They just looked at my portfolio and said things like, "Your use of negative space is really distinctive." One night, Leah, a muralist with paint permanently streaked on her hands, asked, "Have you ever worked large-scale your style would translate beautifully?" I hadn't, but the idea planted itself. When the owner of the coffee shop where Hannah worked mentioned wanting to freshen up their back wall, I nervously sketched a design. To my surprise, he loved it. He offered to pay me not a fortune, but fair. The week I spent painting that wall changed me. Each stroke of color was a reclamation proof that I could create something valuable without anyone pulling strings for me. Neighbors stopped to watch. Customers complimented the work. For the first time, I stood in front of something that was mine, earned, not arranged. As I cleaned my brushes on the final day, Hannah handed me a coffee. "Looks like you're building something new," she said, and she was right. I wasn't healed. The betrayal still burned. But standing before that mural, I knew I was more than my father's judgment, more than my sister's shadow, more than the lies that had defined me. If you've ever rebuilt yourself after betrayal, brick by brick, stroke by stroke, I want to hear your story. Comment below. And if you believe in the power of starting over, don't forget to subscribe so you can walk this road with me. Because this was just the beginning of my resurrection. And soon, the cracks in my family's perfect facade would widen until the entire foundation collapsed. By the time I finished my first mural, I had started to believe in myself again. But while I was reclaiming pieces of my life, my family's world was crumbling. The cracks that opened at my birthday dinner widened into chasms no one could patch. It began with an email from Ethan. His words were shaky, typed late at night. "Charlotte, things are bad here. Dad and Vanessa fight every day. Grandpa is talking about suing. Stephanie barely comes around. And the clinic investment is failing. Please call me failing." That single word echoed in my head. The medical clinic that had swallowed the $750,000 meant for me was collapsing. Their primary financial backer had pulled out, leaving my father and James, the perfect surgeon husband, scrambling. When I finally met Ethan at a diner, he looked older than his 16 years, shoulders hunched with worry. Over greasy burgers, he spilled everything. Dad yells all the time. Vanessa cries or screams back. Grandpa's lawyers keep sending letters. And Stephanie, she told James she never wanted the clinic expansion in the first place. She's furious. She says she's tired of living Dad's dream instead of her own. Hearing that was like watching the golden statue of my sister finally crack. For years, she had been the measuring stick held against me, the successful one, the model, the proof that my father's methods worked. And now she was suffocating too. "What about you?" I asked gently. Ethan shrugged. "I hate being home. I spend most nights at friends' houses. It's easier than listening to all of them tear each other apart. I miss when things felt normal. I miss when you were around. His words cut deeper than I expected. My leaving had created a void for him, and guilt twisted in my stomach. But I also knew this wasn't on me. It was the inevitable fallout of years of control manipulation and lies finally colliding. At the same time, my grandfather was refusing to back down. He told my father point blank repay the money or face legal consequences. For the first time, my father's unshakable confidence faltered. The man who once strutted through life, certain of his superiority, was now cornered. The irony wasn't lost on me. He had taken what wasn't his because he thought he knew best, and now that very arrogance was dragging him under. I should have felt triumphant, but instead, all I felt was exhaustion. Because the truth was watching their world collapse didn't erase the years of hurt. It didn't magically give me back the nights I cried over bills or the confidence stolen from me by secret manipulations. Yet, something inside me shifted as I listened to Ethan. For the first time, I realized the golden child wasn't shining anymore. Stephanie admitted she hated her career. James's perfect practice was collapsing. Vanessa's polished image was cracking. Even my father's authority was eroding. They were human, flawed, broken. And for the first time, I wasn't the only one carrying the label of disappointment. Still, one thing remained clear while their house of cards collapsed. I was building something new. My art, my independence, my truth. And as much as I wanted to cut every tie, Ethan's voice reminded me that I couldn't walk away completely. He was innocent in this war. He didn't deserve to be collateral damage. Have you ever watched the people who always seemed untouchable finally face the consequences of their own choices? Did it feel like justice or just another wound? Share your thoughts below. Because for me, it wasn't justice yet. Not until my father faced me directly, not until he admitted the truth out loud. That confrontation was coming, and when it did, there would be no way back. The Boston Public Garden was alive with color the day I met my grandfather again. Tulips and cherry blossoms swayed in the spring breeze, their beauty almost mocking the heaviness I carried inside. I hadn't spoken to him since the night everything collapsed, but he had left messages every day. Finally, I agreed to meet. He looked older when I spotted him sitting on a bench by the swan boats. His tall frame was slightly hunched, and his silver hair caught the sunlight like threads of frost. When he saw me, his blue eyes softened. "Thank you for coming, Charlotte," he said, his voice hoarse. We sat in silence for a moment, the sounds of children laughing and ducks splashing around us. Finally, he reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. He handed it to me with trembling hands. Inside was a bank statement showing a balance of $750,000 in an account with my name on it. I recovered the full amount he explained. Your father signed legal documents acknowledging misappropriation. He repaid it from his personal accounts. This money is yours now, no strings attached. I stared at the paper, but instead of joy, a strange emptiness settled over me. I'm not sure I want it anymore, I whispered. He looked at me bewildered. Why not? Because it feels tainted, like another thing I didn't earn. Another reason to question if I've ever built anything with my own hands. His face tightened with regret. May I tell you a story, one I've never shared with you? I nodded, curiosity breaking through the numbness. When I was 23, he began fresh out of architecture school. My father offered to help me start my own firm. He had connections, capital, everything I needed. But I was too proud. I wanted to prove I could do it alone. For years, I struggled tiny apartments, unpaid bills, projects that barely paid. Your grandmother was the one who helped me see the truth. Accepting help doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're given tools. What you build with them is what matters. He turned to me, eyes glistening. I made a mistake with you. I interfered when I should have been honest. Your scholarship, your internship, I thought I was protecting you. But I see now I was taking away the chance for you to stand on your own. For that, I'm sorry. My throat tightened. Do you know what it feels like to realize your victories weren't what you thought? That they had someone else's fingerprints all over them? Yes, he said quietly, because I lived it. But Charlotte, your talent is real. No one can give you passion or vision, that's yours. What I did was wrong, but it doesn't erase who you are. We sat in silence, the weight of years pressing between us. Then he placed a hand on my shoulder. I want you to have this money not as a chain, but as a choice. Use it or don't. That's up to you. But don't reject it just to punish yourself or me. For the first time, I saw him not just as my champion, but as a flawed man who had tried to love me in clumsy, damaging ways. And I realized I had a choice. I could let the betrayal define me, or I could decide what came next. Have you ever been given something you weren't sure you wanted because accepting it felt like losing a piece of yourself? Tell me in the comments, and stay with me because what came next was a twist I never saw coming. Because just as I was beginning to find peace with Grandpa, my sister would appear with a confession that would change everything. A week after meeting Grandpa, I was at the coffee shop working on sketches for another mural when the bell over the door jingled. I looked up, expecting Hannah or one of the baristas. Instead, it was Stephanie. For a moment, I froze. My instinct was to pack up and leave to avoid the confrontation I wasn't ready for. But Hannah, standing behind the counter, caught my eye. She gave me a quiet nod that said, "You're strong enough for this." Stephanie looked different. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail instead of the sleek blowout she usually wore. She was in jeans, not her perfectly tailored slacks. For once, she didn't look like the golden child lawyer. She looked like a woman who had been through hell. "Can I sit?" she asked softly. I gestured to the chair across from me. The silence stretched until Hannah brought over a coffee for her, giving me a supportive smile before slipping away. I left the firm. Stephanie blurted, her hands trembling around the cup. 2 weeks ago, I couldn't do it anymore. The panic attacks, the late nights pretending to love something I hated, it was killing me. I blinked, stunned. This was the sister who always seemed untouchable, the one my father paraded as proof of his success. "What are you doing now?" She gave a shaky laugh, figuring it out. "I started piano lessons again. Remember how I used to play in high school? I want to see if it still feels like mine." Her eyes grew wet. "Dad hates it. Says I'm throwing away everything I worked for. But for the first time in my life, I don't care what he thinks." The words tumbled out of her faster now. "I'm sorry, Charlotte, for everything. For knowing about the apartment and staying silent. For letting Dad pit us against each other. For benefiting from money that should have been yours. I was a coward. It was easier to stay quiet than to stand up to him." The rawness in her voice caught me off guard. For years I'd seen her as my rival, the one who had everything while I had nothing. But sitting across from me now, she looked small, broken. "You could have told me," I said, my voice low but firm. "Any time in those 6 months you could have warned me. Instead, you watched me drown." I know. Tears slid down her cheeks. I told myself it wasn't my place, that Dad was handling it. But the truth is, I was terrified. Terrified of losing his approval. Terrified of being like you. The words stung, but I saw the truth in her eyes. Jealous of me, I asked bitterly. "Yes," she whispered. "You were brave. You chased your passion even when everyone told you not to. I did what Dad wanted, and I hate my life for it. I envied your courage every single day." For the first time, I didn't see her as perfect. I saw her as human, flawed, scared, just like me. We sat there, two sisters stripped of illusions. Not rivals, not golden child and disappointment. Just women trying to figure out who they were outside of our father's shadow. When we finally stood to leave, she reached for me. Not quite a hug, but close. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said, "but maybe we can start over." I nodded. Not forgiveness, not yet. But maybe, just maybe, the beginning of understanding. If you've ever realized the person you envied was just as lost as you were, share that moment below. And don't forget to subscribe, because the final reckoning with my father was still ahead, and it would change everything. 3 days later, there was a knock at my basement apartment door. I almost didn't answer. But curiosity won, and when I pulled it open, I found my father standing there. He looked out of place, his expensive suit clashing with the cracked concrete steps and peeling paint of my building. For the first time, he didn't look powerful. He looked uncertain. "May I come in?" he asked. I stepped aside silently. He glanced around my small space, the water stains on the ceiling, the secondhand couch, the drafting table crowded with sketches. His eyes lingered on the mural designs I was working on for a cafe. For once, he didn't sneer. He just looked tired. I know you've spoken with your grandfather and your sister, he began, his voice low. I thought it was time we talked as well. About my failure as your father. The bluntness caught me off guard. I had braced for excuses, not admission. He continued, pacing slowly. I convinced myself I was protecting you, that I knew what was best. I spent my life believing success only looked one way: wealth, power, prestige. When you chose differently, I couldn't understand it. So I took control. I folded my arms. You didn't just take control. You stole from me. You decided I wasn't capable. Do you realize how humiliating that is? Yes, he admitted. His voice cracked, and for the first time I saw something I had never seen in him: regret. I was wrong. Deeply wrong. And I'm sorry. The words felt foreign coming from him. I studied his face, searching for manipulation, but all I saw was exhaustion. He gestured toward my work table. Show me. Show me what you love. What you fought so hard to protect. Reluctantly, I began explaining the mural sketches, how I layered colors for depth, how I used symbolism to tell stories on blank walls. To my shock, he listened. Really listened. He asked questions not to criticize, but to understand. At one point, he picked up a sketch of coffee plants winding around a sunlit window. This is remarkable, he said quietly. I had no idea you were this talented. My throat tightened. You never looked. His eyes lowered. You're right, but I'm looking now. We spent an hour together talking, not as father and daughter locked in a battle, but as two people finally seeing each other clearly. When I began cleaning my brushes, he surprised me by helping. A small gesture, but it cracked something inside me. Before he left, he said, "The money your grandfather recovered, it's yours. No strings. Use it however you want. I won't offer advice unless you ask. But I want you to know something: I'm proud of you. Not because of what you've achieved by traditional standards, but because you've had the courage to live authentically. That's something I'm only just beginning to understand." For a long moment, I didn't know what to say. I had waited my entire life to hear those words. And now that they'd come, I wasn't sure if I could believe them. But I knew one thing. This was the first time my father had seen me, really seen me. And that was the beginning of something I had thought impossible, rebuilding not on his terms, but on mine. Have you ever had someone you thought would never change finally look at you differently? Did it feel too late or like the start of something new? Share it below. I want to hear your story. Because for me, that day wasn't forgiveness, but it was the first brick in a bridge I never thought could exist. 6 months after the night that shattered everything, I stood in the middle of my new studio, a converted loft in Somerville, with high ceilings, tall windows, and walls splashed with works in progress. It wasn't the Beacon Street apartment my grandfather had envisioned. It was better. It was mine. I had used part of the recovered money to purchase the space outright, freeing myself from the weight of rent and giving me room to breathe, to create. The rest I kept invested not under my father's control, but under mine. For the first time, I felt ownership not only of my space, but of my life. My mural business had grown beyond anything I imagined. What started with one coffee shop wall had blossomed into commissions for restaurants, schools, and community centers across Boston. I even hired 2 assistant artists I'd met through Hannah's circle so we could take on larger projects. Together, we transformed blank walls into stories. On Saturday mornings, Ethan came by to sketch. He showed a natural eye for perspective, his pencil lines sure despite his teenage uncertainty. Whether he pursued art seriously or not didn't matter. What mattered was that he was exploring without pressure, without judgment. I vowed never to make him feel the way Dad had made me feel. Stephanie had followed through on her promise. She left law behind and began teaching music at a community arts center. Her voice when she spoke about her students carried a light I'd never seen before. We met often, cautiously at first, but over time we began to rebuild, not as rivals, not as golden child and disappointment, but as sisters. My relationship with my father was fragile but shifting. He struggled to stay quiet, to resist the urge to guide, but he tried. When I invited him to the unveiling of a mural at a children's hospital, he stood back watching with quiet awe. When he finally spoke, it wasn't criticism. It was simply, I see now why you love this. For him, that was monumental. Grandpa Thomas became my most frequent visitor. Sometimes we worked side by side, sketching in companionable silence. Sometimes he apologized again for interfering. Each time I told him the same thing, you meant well. And now I finally have the dignity of choice. On a crisp fall evening, I hosted a dinner in the studio to celebrate completing my largest commission yet. Hannah baked a cake decorated with edible paint splatters. My studio filled with laughter from friends, artists, and family, yes, even my family. Dad talked business with one of my colleagues. Stephanie showed Ethan a piano app. Grandpa shared stories of architectural disasters that made Hannah laugh until tears ran down her cheeks. As I refilled glasses, I caught my reflection in the studio window. For a moment, I didn't recognize the woman staring back. She wasn't the struggling daughter begging for approval, or the broken girl betrayed at her birthday dinner. She was stronger, centered, free. I realized something profound. The $750,000, the apartment, the lies, they had all been catalysts. But what truly changed my life wasn't the money. It was the moment I said enough. The moment I stopped seeking their approval and started living on my own terms. The scars of betrayal would always remain, but they no longer defined me. Instead, they marked the place where I had been broken and rebuilt stronger. If you've ever taken the pain someone handed you and turned it into strength, tell me in the comments. And if you want to hear more stories of survival betrayal and the courage to stand tall, make sure you subscribe. Because this isn't the end, it's just the beginning of a new chapter. Because sometimes the hardest betrayals don't destroy us, they set us free. When I look back now, that birthday dinner feels like both the worst night of my life and the beginning of something I never thought possible. The betrayal was sharp, almost unbearable, but it carved out the space I needed to grow. Without it, I might still be chasing approval that was never going to come, still believing my worth depended on fitting into their narrow vision. Today, my studio is filled with color, laughter, and possibility. It's more than a workplace, it's a sanctuary. Every brushstroke reminds me that healing isn't about erasing pain. It's about transforming it into something beautiful. My family is not perfect. They never will be. My father still stumbles between pride and control. Stephanie is still learning who she is outside of law. Grandpa carries guilt for the choices he made. But the difference now is honesty. For the first time, we are building connections, not on illusion, but on truth. Ethan remains my anchor, a reminder that even in the storm, innocence and loyalty can survive. Hannah is my unexpected gift, proof that family can also be chosen, found in the kindness of strangers who show up when you need them most. The scars of betrayal remain, but they no longer define me. They are part of the map of who I am, guiding me toward a life I chose for myself. And maybe that's the lesson I carry forward. You cannot control how others treat you, but you can decide what to build from the rubble. So I build with paint, with courage, with love. And every day I wake up knowing that freedom isn't given, it's claimed.